let's see what's in the video editing software today for my new video.
There's an excellent op-ed published today in the New York Times. This is it right here. It's called What Snowflakes Get Right About Free Speech, and it's by Ulrich Baer.
Steve! I can't escape you, can I, Steve? I just can't. I can't. Every time you get worse and worse, and I've got to beat Heisenberg to the punch, otherwise he's going to beat me to it and get all the views. I can't have that, can I? So, where were we? I need you to repeat what you just said to me.
There's an excellent op-ed published today in the New York Times. This is it right here. It's called What Snowflakes Get Right About Free Speech, and it's by Ulrich Baer.
Ulrich Baer, isn't that the guy that you were fawning over recently? Like, oh, I am not worthy of this guy. He's so amazing. I wish I could meet him. Then you finally met him, but that's besides the point. So, what do snowflakes, which, by the way, what he means by snowflakes is the special snowflakes that we like to call SJWs because, well, they think that they're special, and by snowflake, they're fragile, and everything that we say could offend them, and everything that can offend them should not be allowed to be spoken because, you know, it's offensive, right? Their feelings have to be placated. That's what we mean by snowflake here. I guess he hasn't really defined it yet, but that is what we're going on here. But I'd love to know what they get right about free speech. I mean, it's not like everything people like Steve has said is totally wrong, but let's go, come on.
And I cannot recommend it to you highly enough. In the piece, Ulrich Baer describes how these student protesters who have come out to stand against speakers such as Milo Yiannopoulos or Richard Spencer in recent weeks and months at college campuses across the United States. These students who have often been attacked and vilified by people on the right as being anti-free speech or putting their own feelings and their own sensitivities ahead of stalwart principles of the republic like free speech.
These people are not just students. Yeah, a lot of them are students, but they are also students that are part of organisations like BAM and Antifa. And even when they're not, they're still these rabid radical leftists who don't seem to really mind hurting people when they say something that they don't agree with. And as we've seen, the reason why these riots at Berkeley happen at free speech events are not because these people like Richard Spencer and Milo Yiannopoulos are speaking and saying horrible, degenerate things that should be stopped. No, they're doing this to stop people like Milo in particular, less so Richard. He's nothing more than an idiot white nationalist who has been given fame because you lot gave it him because you've just spurged out everywhere about him when he's nothing more than your right-wing equivalent. No, the things that Milo and others like Lauren Sutton and even their left-wing counterparts who speak at these events say undermine you. They undermine your arguments. They undermine your agenda. And these people, these useful idiots like Antifa and BAM, don't like that. So what do? They use violence to essentially stop the event from happening, to try and take whatever attention is being placed on the speakers to them. Also, if they can, to stop the event. And this has happened several times. But hey, you know what? They're just these students defending minorities, defending the oppressed from evil right-wingers. Totally nothing to do with the fact that these kids are upholding the establishment. They don't want people who say anything against the establishment from speaking. Hell no. That would just be too inconvenient for Steve.
Are snowflakes, and they just need to be silenced or shamed into going back to their dorms and studying instead of going out and hitting the streets and protesting people like Spencer or Yiannopoulos.
Who are saying that they should be shut up, who are saying they should be shut down for saying their opinions on the side that you disagree with, which is my side. I'm more on the left side against social justice and the radical left. But who are saying that? Who is saying that? Maybe some alt-right voices are saying that, because we know that if you're going to get an ethno-state, you're going to need some authoritarian government action. But other than maybe some people on that side, who's actually saying that? People like Milo Yiannopoulos, remember? People like him, who are saying that? No one. I've not seen anybody like that. But what I do hear, and this is actually a very good point, but something that you can't seem to admit, you don't want to bring up, that the violence that these people have been committing needs to stop and they need to go to jail because they are breaking the law. It's one thing to have a counter protest, whatever, do what you want, that's free speech. But when you're actively going out there to assault people, well then, that's a different matter, isn't it, Steve? Or are you trying to say that that should be allowed because these people are so-called Nazis, right?
Bear argues really persuasively and really articulately that it is actually those folks, the so-called snowflakes, who are the true champions of free speech, not the apologists and the defenders of Spencer and Yiannopoulos and all of the other assorted deplorable people, the hate mongers and purveyors of ignorance and intolerance who have for some reason been granted platforms on college campuses with alarming frequency over the last few years.
So according to Steve, and according to this journalist, fake news. The violent, overly sensitive, totally authoritarian radical leftist students and organisations that are out there committing violence and riots in an attempt to stop freedom of speech rallies and speeches at college campuses in America are the actual free speech warriors. And not people like Yiannopoulos, not people like Lauren Southern, not anybody like them. Doesn't matter what side they fall on the spectrum, just as long as they're more in a libertarian bent. It's the authoritarian ones who are protecting free speech by shutting it down, right? I never knew you could do that, Steve. I feel enlightened.
And in this piece, Bear covers a lot of really interesting ground. He talks about the limited value of debates in situations like this. He talks about the idea that there are certain topics that really shouldn't be held up for public debate, that universities shouldn't feel a responsibility to host debates over.
Now, we can all hazard a guess as to what these subjects actually are, people. Let's not kid ourselves. But just because these two don't agree that these things should be talked about, because again, it would be inconvenient for the agenda, that universities shouldn't talk about these things, that we shouldn't talk about these ideas in the discourse. Since when were they the arbiters of free speech? Since when were they the ones who could dictate to the people and to colleges and to anybody really what they can and cannot talk about? And they're saying that they're free speech warriors, that they're the ones that are upholding free speech while they're literally telling people what they can and cannot talk about. Are you seriously this unself-aware, Steve? Or as Stu said, are you just baiting us? But to me, this isn't the bait video. The bait video was the 5 harmful things about Dukes of Hazzard. Thankfully, I'm not doing that one because I've never watched Dukes of Hazzard. So, yeah, Hayes can take that one.
If there is a proposed debate or a proposed sort of implied debate, which is often the excuse used when awful people like Spencer and Yiannopoulos and others of their ilk are invited to speak at college campuses, the excuse made by people who, even by people who claim not to want to defend their ideology, they say, well, we need to hear them out because their ideas need to be heard in order to be argued about and rejected.
Why does he keep bringing up Richard Spencer? Richard Spencer really has nothing to do with what has gone on recently. Yes, he got punched a couple months back, but that's really old news now. Now we're talking about actual full-blown riots again. Actual violent shit happening to stop people from speaking their minds, to stop specific people from expressing themselves because one group doesn't want them to express those things for whatever reason. And yet he's saying that debating is apparently some excuse by these evil Nazis to spread their evil ideology, and he balks at the idea that we should allow these people to speak so we know what they believe, we can discuss what they believe, we can analyse what they believe, and if it's deemed to be crazy and just totally out there and isn't worth adopting, we can just say, look, those are the extremists, let's ignore them. No, apparently we can't do that. We've got to shut them up, shut them down, keep them buried where they can grow and fester like a cancer. Is that really what he thinks? That debate is an excuse for them to propagandise and brainwash, while this violence that's going on that he's yet to actually acknowledge exists, he's nothing more than free speech defending, right? God damn it, Steve, you're getting worse. I just love this projection. Seriously, do you work at cinema now to help pay for your channel? I mean, that Patreon, how's it going, considering the amount of views you get these days?
And Bear makes the point that in most cases, people like Richard Spencer and Milo Yiannopoulos have nothing new to say and will not be informing anyone in the audience about their views or telling anyone anything that they haven't heard already.
Steve, you know as well as I do that there are millions of people who are yet to be truly informed about what's going on. So you know it's in your best interest to inform these people about your side and why your side is right. Yet you're trying to say that, oh, these people have nothing new to say. Therefore, these people should not have to speak because everybody knows what's going on. Well, the sad thing is, not everybody knows, and that's the majority of people don't know what's going on. They're not very informed about what's going on. So I find it very cheap that you are saying that they have nothing new to say when you haven't got anything new to say. Yeah, again, trying to just tell people what they can and cannot talk about, Steve. Are you sure you're for free speech? Are you sure you're just not about dictating to people what they can and cannot talk about? Are you about free speech as long as it's something that you are totally for, right?
You are merely, by giving them an audience, by giving them a platform, you are merely enabling them and allowing them to perpetuate their hatred and their intolerance and propagate their twisted and in many cases harmful and dangerous ideology.
You know what else isn't helping, Steve? By inciting riots, beating people up, and by essentially not giving these people a platform, by smearing these people in the news. There's a reason why Donald Trump won. Because people are seeing through this propaganda that you yourself have just released. People are sick and tired of it. And that's why people like Milo Yiannopoulos, less so Richard Spencer, although he is now becoming more popular because he's been victimised. The only people exposing the masses to dangerous ideas are social justice warriors.
And I've linked to the piece in the description box of this video. I urge all of you to go read it. But there is one particular passage that I want to share with you. Ulrich Bear says, quote, "The idea of freedom of speech does not mean a blanket permission to say anything anybody thinks."
Well, considering these are Americans talking, yes, it kind of does. Yes, it does. The issue here is whether or not what you say can impact on people's actions, but let's just not get carried away with ourselves and let's just continue and watch this cringe.
It means balancing the inherent value of a given view with the obligation to ensure that other members of a given community can participate in discourse as fully recognized members of that community.
And that it's not a case of you can't have one without the other. Both exist within that concept. The reason why you have the First Amendment is to make sure that people who are outside of the dominant point of view can have their voices heard. That means that people like Richard Spencer, people like Milo Yiannopoulos, should be allowed to speak. You have literally defeated your own argument. You've been saying that these people shouldn't be allowed to speak because of what they believe in and how they've got anything to say and how debate is just an excuse. I mean, you yourself just defended their right to do so because they are outside of the norm. So well done. You're free speech warriors now.
Free speech protections, not only but especially in universities, which aim to educate students in how to belong to various communities, should not mean that someone's humanity or their right to participate in political speech as political agents can be freely attacked, demeaned, or questioned.
There's a lot to go through with that, so let's just break it down. Firstly, universities are not meant to teach people how to be part of communities. They're there to teach them skills. They're there to teach them knowledge. That's a very collectivist thing that has currently ruined our society. Conversely, free speech protections allow people to attack these people's point of views, to demean these people's point of views, as long as it doesn't go into libel, slander, defamation, etc, etc. And yes, even question them. That's the whole point. You're allowed to question things under free speech. That's what you can do. And I think that speaks volumes as to why he wrote that and why you quoted that. It really isn't about the things he said before, which contradict what he wrote at the bottom. It's all about stopping people from questioning, from attacking their status quo. And I think that speaks volumes.
Bear also points out how the abilities of folks in marginalized groups, for instance, trans people, people of color, undocumented immigrants, and the list goes on, have been attacked and undermined by others in the name of freedom of speech.
In what way were these people marginalized by free speech, or people enacting their right to free speech? How? Firstly, I think that your ideology, painting them all as victims, telling them that they're all victims, and that there is one enemy, the straight white male, that has oppressed them for yonks, I think that's far more damaging, and I think that that has caused them far more difficulties in being accepted than people enacting their right to free speech. And that's with undocumented immigrants. Aren't they undocumented, therefore that's illegal, so how would enacting free speech undermine them? What are we undermining? They're undermining their right to break the law.
And that reminds me, as many things in this discussion often do, of the paradox of tolerance, which is something that I have spoken about in videos before, and a lot of you already know what it is, but just in case you haven't heard of the paradox of tolerance, it was stated most famously by Karl Popper, who said that if you want a truly tolerant society, the one thing you must not be tolerant of is intolerance. The paradox is there can be no such thing as perfect tolerance.
Now this is a paradox, yeah, but it seems to be that Steve and this other guy are talking mainly about thought, intolerant thought and tolerant thought. It's not actions, because we don't tolerate intolerant actions, but we should tolerate intolerant thoughts, because that doesn't harm anybody, does it? And as long as these people aren't going out of their way to trouble people, then there's no issue there, is it? And as we tolerate those people thinking that, and then we allow them to speak, other people can say that, yeah, they're ridiculous, they're extremists, let's not go there. Because you can educate people. That's the whole point, isn't it? What I've been trying to say for God knows how long on this channel. But people like Steve don't want that. They just want to force these people down. And you don't get anywhere with that. In fact, these people love the fact that you're forcing them and allowing them to play the victim like you tend to do. It allows them to grow. It allows people to become sympathetic to them. And we don't want that, do we? We want them out there to be shown warts and all, so people can make their own decisions. And I feel this paradox is only an issue to those who are truly intolerant. I don't know about you guys, but I just feel like this is Steve just expressing his latent intolerance.
Because if you are tolerant of everything, including intolerance, then ultimately intolerance will take over. The intolerant will impose their will on the tolerant, and you will wind up with a final product of an intolerant society, which was allowed to happen in the name of tolerance.
I feel that this paradox is nothing more than an argument against tolerance by people who claim to be tolerant, because why would you argue against tolerance when you're trying to put up the veneer that you are tolerant, Steve? Why would you bring this up if you were truly tolerant? You're not. You're anything but tolerant. You're not tolerant of people's ideas. You're not tolerant of people's race and people's gender and all sorts like that, as long as they, of course, adhere to what you believe, that is. Other than that, you are incredibly intolerant towards them. This thing does suit your argument because you are inherently intolerant. You are inherently bigoted, like the people you claim to be. The intolerant don't take over the tolerant because the tolerant are tolerant. They take over because they aren't challenged. Just because you're tolerant doesn't mean that you can't challenge what they say or what they do. This argument can only stand if tolerant people don't do anything, which is not always the case. And that's why, for example, the Nazis didn't win World War II now. Isn't it, Steve?
See, a lot of folks in the atheist and skeptical community especially believe that when they are defending the rights of awful people like Spencer or Yiannopoulos, or awful groups like neo-Nazi groups or the Ku Klux Klan or other white supremacist or white nationalist groups to speak, that they are doing something good, that they're defending the principle of freedom of speech. And they think, well, I have to defend freedom of speech for people like that because I want to preserve it for people like me and for other people. And that's a wonderful idea, and that's a wonderful concept, and it's a wonderful principle. But I don't think that it translates to real life perfectly.
Well, that's funny, Steve, because in my country and your country, we've not been taken over by them, have we? And I wonder why that is. I wonder why that is. I mean, in my country we have pretty strict hate speech laws, but even then, the EDL and the British Nationalist Party and other parties and groups like them are allowed to exist, and in some cases can actually speak. And they have appeared on some of the biggest television debate shows in the country. Nick Griffin, I don't know if he's still part of the BNP anymore, I think he left a long time ago, appeared on Question Time. And he got absolutely levered in the debate. Absolutely levered. He embarrassed himself immensely. And that contributed to the eventual complete decline of the party. Even though they were already declining as it was, that completely nailed the coffin. They're no longer relevant. The KKK are nothing anymore. They're barely a thing at this point in the US. And the alt-right are also barely a thing. Why is that? Because in the 60s, at least with the KKK, people went down south, or in the south, rose up, debated them, peaceful protests, for example, and defeated them. They got rid of Jim Crow, they got rid of lynchings. They managed to successfully destroy their ideology to the point they're literally a laughingstock now. But hey, apparently that principle doesn't always work in reality. Well, it does, doesn't it?
I think that if you truly care about freedom of speech, and the situation you want to see realized is the maximum number of people able to exercise their freedom of speech in our society, able to participate in political conversations, especially in ways that will be recognized and valued. And if you particularly would like to see this happen for groups of people who have been historically disenfranchised, who have been historically ignored or silenced or erased, whose contributions and ideas and voices have not been valued, then I don't see how you can justify choosing to defend neo-Nazis and people like Richard Spencer and people like Milo Yiannopoulos when they are protested, when their events are shut down by students at those colleges who have simply had enough and refuse to allow people like that to use their microphones and their stages and their venues to speak to their audience and spread their hatred and intolerance.
Because firstly, those students don't own those universities. I know they may be dictating to the deans, etc., what they can and cannot do, because the deans and the administrators are scared of the reaction because they don't want to get themselves beaten up and essentially demonized in the press and online by these groups of students. That's the first thing. Those students don't own that, so it's not up to them who can and cannot talk. If these people aren't given their right to do so, if we don't allow them to express their right that they are allowed to do so under law, then what does that make us? That makes us authoritarian. That means that, therefore, we are allowing our principles to be undermined by authoritarian principles which seek to destroy our free speech. Like you, Steve. The reason why we allow these people to speak, why we defend their right to speak, is because it's good for everybody, as you've mentioned before. And the reason why we attack these students for shutting these things down with the use of violence and through the use of smearing these people and by using the internet to essentially lie about these people, to use change.org, for example, to petition the banning of these people, is because, again, it goes against our principles, it goes against the First Amendment in your country, and it goes against free speech laws in my country. It goes against all that, and you're defending people abusing the law, people abusing these people's rights. And you sit there and you virtue signal about how you're all for the rights of minorities like me and gay people and trans people and undocumented immigrants, when actually you aren't. You're not interested in those people, because if you were interested in upholding their rights, free speech would be near the top of that list at least for someone like you. But it isn't. And that's why you are an authoritarian and no better than the Nazis, no better than fascists. You are the fascists.
If you believe in freedom of speech, you should be on the side of the protesters. You should be not defending the rights of people like Spencer and Yiannopoulos and others like that.
So in order to be pro-free speech, I have to be against free speech. I'm loving the double think. You truly are making Orwell just roll in his grave, Steve. Why would I, as someone who's pro-free speech, be on the side of violent thugs who are there to break up free speech rallies and events because they don't like what the person has to say? Why? Why would I be? That goes against everything, Steve. And you say that without a hint of irony, without a hint of sarcasm, or a hint of self-awareness about what you're saying. You're contradicting yourself so many times in this video. It's insane.
To spread their hatred.
You've yet to show any evidence of people like Milo Yiannopoulos actually being hateful. And you've yet to actually show evidence somehow, you know, it's not hard, of Richard Spencer. Come on, seriously? Really, Steve?
This is not an easy issue because we are human beings, we are imperfect, and there will never be a perfect system for determining who it is best to listen to and platform and who it is best to ignore.
It's called the First Amendment, it's called unfettered free speech in Europe, even though we don't have that in Europe, I know that, but that's what it would be called because we don't have a First Amendment. And also, why not leave it to the individuals to decide who they want to listen to, who they want to talk to, who they want in their universities? Why not? Oh wait, we can't, because groups could be threatened. We can't allow groups to do anything, all the collectivism.
But we can at least decide amongst ourselves that the principle we should follow is not only freedom of speech, but guaranteeing freedom of speech to the largest possible number of people, maximum freedom of speech. And we should not let our idealization of the principle of perfect freedom of speech or perfect tolerance prevent us from achieving the attainable goal of maximum tolerance or maximum freedom of speech.
Then why, in this entire video, have you argued against that entire idea? You've just contradicted yourself. You've now said that, oh, to achieve this goal, we must be tolerant. Oh, but wait, we can't be tolerant of people like Milo Yiannopoulos because allegedly he's hateful. Steve, either we support free speech and allow Milo to speak at Berkeley and allow Ann Coulter and other people to speak their minds there as well without having to deal with violent thugs like Antifa, or in my country, we allow people like Tyler, the creator, who hasn't done anything wrong at all, to rap and tour in our country because some people don't like the fact he uses certain words in his lyrics. And we disavow people like Antifa and overly sensitive snowflakes such as yourself, and denounce their actions and allow these people to speak and perform the way that they want to perform and speak. How about that? That must be a fine way to achieve the goal you want, other than, shutting them down and being for that. Because doing those things is totally going to lead to a utopia where everybody's allowed to be tolerant and speak their mind, right?
A society where people who push ignorance and intolerance and hateful, dehumanizing ideologies are, legally speaking, free to say whatever they wish, but practically speaking are not invited on prominent radio or TV shows or podcasts or YouTube channels, are not given lucrative book deals, are not invited to speak on stage at colleges and universities, and generally speaking find it difficult, if not impossible, to amplify and spread their awful messages beyond their little circle of ignorance and hate.
And that's why you aren't for free speech, because you just said that. You've contradicted yourself once more.
That sounds pretty damn good to me. How about you?
Sounds horrible, Steve, and of course it's damn good to you, because you don't like other people's opinions. That's why you block people. That's why you block people like Shayra, who has been actually raped, because she disagrees with your arguments about rape. And that, again, just shows up what you're like and what other people like you are like. And to be honest, I could just repeat everything that I've already said before in some kind of epic conclusion, but there's really no need to do that, people. This has been Charming Man 93. Like and share the video, subscribe to my channel, hit that motherfucking like button, smash it like the Hulk, and donate to my Patreon if you are inclined to do so, if you love my work. It's all fun and games in the end, people, so until next time, I'll see you all later.